Did you know some RGB mini LED TVs are not actually RGB? Apparently, some brands have only been using two color diodes in their RGB mini LED models instead of three independently controllable red, green, and blue diodes. To add to the confusion, some TV manufacturers have adopted the term RGB mini LED to market their RGB-backlit LED LCD TVs, while others have chosen to go down the micro RGB route, perhaps with an EVO or AI suffix sprinkled in too. Part of the problem is that there is currently no strict industry standard defining what qualifies as an RGB LED TV, which means terminologies are invented for essentially the same hardware. Those of you who have been following this channel may remember that Sony demoed a prototype of its RGB backlit LED LCD TV last year, but hasn't settled on a name yet, until now. The company has decided to call its iteration True RGB in an attempt to establish its version as the most accurate implementation which unlocks the full benefits of RGB backlit LED LCD technology, namely higher luminance, wider viewing angles, and reduced blooming artifacts. So Sony's objective here is not just differentiation, but to establish a clearer reference point in a category that is quickly becoming inconsistent and difficult for consumers to interpret. But is Sony genuinely doing something different? Or is this just another label in an already confusing market? To understand what Sony is trying to do here, we need to go back more than 20 years, because Sony hasn't just suddenly entered the RGB LED market out of nowhere in 2026 to chase a trend. The company actually has a lineage that stretches all the way back to 2004 with the Qualia 005, widely regarded as the world's first LCD TV with independent RGB light sources. So for Sony, True RGB represents the next major step in its LED backlight control evolution over 2 decades. Today, RGB backlighting is back, but multiple brands are entering the space at once. And that's where things start to get messy. Because right now, you'll hear terms like RGB mini LED, micro RGB, mini RGB, and now Sony's True RGB. But here's the key point. Not all RGB backlights are created equal. Sony believes that a true RGB LED system should have 3 independently controllable red, green, and blue diodes to maximize pure color expression and expand color volume. And one little known fact is that the Bravia 5 mini LED television actually uses a 2-diode backlight, but Sony has deliberately refrained from marketing it as an RGB backlit TV because the company did not want to dilute the proposition of its True RGB branding. But hardware is not the full story. In Sony's view, True RGB is not just about having 3 colors, but about controlling them with sufficient precision to reproduce both color and brightness accurately across different scenes and conditions. Furthermore, what makes Sony's implementation True RGB is its more advanced backlight drive control designed to deliver accurate colors and preserve the creative intent. And Sony would arguably know more than most about creative intent, thanks to its professional heritage spanning the entire production pipeline, from content acquisition using cameras such as the Sony Venice 2, to mastering on Sony BVM reference monitors which are widely considered the gold standard in Hollywood, and ultimately to consumer Bravia displays in the home, aligning with the brand's "Cinema is coming home" philosophy. We were given multiple demonstrations at Sony's office in Tokyo, but for today's video, the only one we were permitted to film and show is this setup consisting of 4 screens. On your bottom right is Sony's new True RGB LED LCD TV. On your bottom left is the current flagship mini LED model from Sony, namely the Bravia 9. Above these displays are corresponding units with the front glass and color filters removed to expose the underlying LED backlight, allowing us to observe how each system operates. As you can see, the Sony Bravia 9 utilizes blue LEDs as its backlight, which are then converted into colors via a quantum dot enhancement film or QDEF. In contrast, the new True RGB LED TV employs a backlight composed of independently adjustable red, green, and blue LEDs, working in concert not only to form the color foundation of the image, but also to generate higher contrast and color luminance than what the Bravia 9 with the blue or white backlight is capable of. This concept underpins several other demos conducted by Sony, which unfortunately we were not allowed to film. Essentially, Sony purchased 3 competitor RGB Mini LED and Micro RGB TVs from the market, 2025 models, since 2026 versions were not available yet, and dissected at least 2 of them to reveal how their RGB backlight systems function. The largest unit was spared disassembly due to its sheer size and cost, so only 1 complete example was available. Sony invited us to inspect the size and layout of the individual red, green and blue LED chips using a loupe, and while Sony's RGB LED chips were smaller than those found in the 2 exposed competitor models, they were still marginally larger than the 100 micrometer figure often cited by Samsung in its micro RGB marketing. However, given that the spacing between each LED module, each containing 1 red, 1 green and 1 blue LED, is approximately 1 cm, Sony's position is that micrometer level differences in LED chip size are negligible compared to the centimeter level spacing between modules, and therefore do not materially impact picture quality. Instead, Sony argues that factors such as LED density and backlight control algorithms are far more important. To support this claim, Sony demonstrated that some RGB Mini LED TVs utilize RGB color backlighting for test patterns, but revert to white backlighting during real-world content, thereby forfeiting many of the potential advantages of RGB LED systems. One particularly revealing example showed an RGB Mini LED TV using RGB LED backlighting on full-field red, green or blue slides, presumably to achieve 100% Rec. 2020 coverage in measurements, but switching to a white backlight when the window size dropped to 80%. By contrast, Sony's True RGB LED TV maintained color backlighting throughout these demonstrations. Interestingly, Sony has also included a setting within the professional picture mode on its True RGB LED TV to toggle between color backlight and white backlight, which was used to illustrate the benefits of its RGB backlight algorithm in terms of viewing angles and blooming suppression. For example, when viewing a paused frame from Joker starring Joaquin Phoenix from an off-axis position, his red jacket appeared noticeably more washed out in white backlight mode, whereas the color backlight mode preserved saturation more effectively and rendered blooming with a red hue rather than white, making it less visually intrusive. Among the competing RGB TVs, one model used an ADS panel and therefore exhibited relatively good viewing angles, but the other 2 models equipped with VA panels showed more pronounced color shift and more visible white blooming, suggesting either reliance on white backlight behavior in real content or less sophisticated RGB control algorithms. Another demonstration involved measuring the brightness of the sun in an HDR10 clip from alpha graded to 4000 nits, while competing RGB LED models measured between approximately 700 and 2200 nits. Sony's True RGB LED TV was able to sustain nearly 4000 nits, coming closest to reproducing the intended highlight brightness. To further reinforce its claims regarding color accuracy, Sony set up a dedicated comparison room featuring its new True RGB LED television versus a Bravia 9 Mini LED TV, with the BVM HX3110 mastering monitor as reference. With both TVs set to their most accurate professional picture mode, the True RGB model demonstrated superior performance in several areas, even against what is arguably one of the most accomplished Mini LED TVs currently available on the market, largely due to its RGB backlight control system. In a scene from Black Widow, the difference in blooming characteristics was clearly visible. On the Bravia 9, blooming around a red light source appeared white due to the limitations of a blue-based backlight, whereas on the True RGB LED TV, the blooming took on a red hue, which appeared more natural as it better resembled retinal light scatter in human vision. Using a scene from Monster Hunter featuring a bright light source surrounded by darkness, Sony demonstrated that the True RGB LED TV was able to maintain the correct color hue in the illuminated region, closely matching the HX3110 reference monitor, whereas the Bravia 9 exhibited a cooler tint influenced by its blue backlight. The Alpha HDR10 clip reappeared in this comparison, again showing that Sony's True RGB LED television could reproduce the 4000 nit sun with similar highlight intensity and detail to the mastering monitor when HDR tone mapping was disabled on both televisions to allow hard clipping at peak luminance. Another eye-opening example came from Top Gun Maverick, where director Joseph Kosinski had previously observed that the Bravia 9 rendered a deep blue tone with a slight purplish bias. Thanks to the wider color gamut enabled by the more precise spectral output of RGB backlighting, Sony's new True RGB LED TV was able to reproduce the intended P3 blue more faithfully, aligning more closely with the director's intent, literally. There is also a demo highlighting improved viewing angles using a scene from Angry Birds, although I cannot confirm whether it was from the first or the second film, and I absolutely refuse to purchase one, let alone 2 4K Blu-rays just to verify, so you will just have to take my word for it that the Sony True RGB LED TV maintained color fidelity more effectively off-axis than the Bravia 9, despite the latter already incorporating X-wide angle technology. Notwithstanding these improvements, it is important to emphasize that Sony's True RGB LED TV remains a transmissive display that relies on a backlight, albeit a more advanced RGB backlight, and is not an emissive display like OLED, where every pixel can independently emit red, green, and blue light. Sony has also been clear that it does not intend to position True RGB as an OLED killer. Instead, the company views it as a potential best-of-both-worlds solution, combining the high brightness and color volume advantages of LED LCD technology with improved color accuracy and control. Ultimately, the greatest challenge with RGB backlighting is not the hardware itself, but the control, specifically the algorithms required to manage the behavior of red, green, and blue elements in real time without introducing artifacts, color shifting, or inconsistencies. This is where Sony believes it has a competitive advantage, leveraging the combined expertise of its professional monitor division and consumer Bravia engineering teams to develop a new backlight drive system. In fact, Sony says its True RGB LED TV employs a similar local dimming concept to that used on the BVM HX3110 mastering monitor, which, frankly, comes across as rather an unfair advantage, not unlike Henry Cavill's genetics. So stepping back, what Sony is trying to do here is not just launch another TV technology, but to define what RGB LED should be, at a time when the category is at risk of becoming increasingly fragmented and confusing. Sony isn't just saying, we have RGB backlighting. They are saying, RGB backlighting only matters if you can truly control the red, green, and blue LEDs independently with enough accuracy to preserve the creative intent. You can drive a Ferrari at 200 miles an hour, but driving in the wrong direction will just get you further from where you want to go. For this high-level overview, there are still details I am not permitted to disclose, including exact model numbers, full specifications, and precise launch timings. Although I can confirm that Sony's True RGB LED TVs are expected to arrive in spring 2026. Now, if you're interested in buying a new Sony TV, you can support this channel by purchasing from our friends at Richer Sounds, a trusted British AV retailer with more than 50 stores in the UK, who provides 6 years warranty on the vast majority of TVs if you join the company's VIP club. You will get the best deals through cheaper VIP exclusive in-store only prices, complimentary gifts or freebies, so go visit your local Richer Sounds store or call telesales for your next TV purchase. Thanks again for your support. Okay, during my time in Tokyo, I was also given the opportunity to conduct my own measurements and evaluate real-world content on Sony's True RGB LED TV in a side-by-side comparison against the Bravia 9 and a BVM HX3110 mastering monitor. And once the embargo lifts, you can watch my full first look analysis video by clicking here.